Now tell me what's amiss with me.
I'm in love with somebody else. It's nobody in particular, only an ideal. I never met the kind of man I mean.
Tell me about him. What is he like?
Well, in the first place, I don't think my ideal would talk like this. He would be a harder and sterner man, not so ready to adapt himself to a silly girl's whim. But above all, he must be a man who could look death in the face and have no fear. A man of great deeds and strange experiences. It is never a man that I should love, but always the glories he had won, for they would be reflected upon me.
We don't all get the same chances in life.
But chances are all around you. It is the mark of the kind of man I mean that he makes his own chances. You can't hold him back. There are heroisms all around us waiting to be done. It's for men to do them and for women to reserve their love as a reward for such men. Like that young Frenchman who went up last week in a balloon. It was blowing a gale of wind, but because he was announced to go, he insisted on starting. The wind blew him 1,500 miles in 24 hours, and he fell in the middle of Russia. That was the kind of man, I mean. Think of the women he loved and how other women must have envied her. Oh, that's what I should like to be. Envied for my man.
I would have done it to please you.
But you shouldn't do it merely to please me. You should do it because you can't help yourself. Now, when you described the Wigan coal explosion last month, could you not have gone down and helped those people in spite of the danger?
I did.
You never said so.
There was nothing worth bragging about.
I didn't know. That was brave of you.
I had to. If you want to write good copy, you must be where the stories are.
What a prosaic motive. It seems to take all the romance out of it, but still, whatever the motive, I'm glad you went down in that mine. I dare say that I am a foolish woman with a young girl's fancies. If I marry, I do want to marry a famous man.
Give me a chance and see if I will take it. Besides, as you say, men ought to make their own opportunities and not wait until they're given. I'll do something in the world yet.
Why not? You have everything a man should have. Youth, health, strength, education, and energy.
And if I'm successful?
Oh, not another word. You'd better get to the office or you'll be late for evening duty.
All right. I'll talk to you later. Goodbye, Gladys.
Goodbye, Ed.
I found myself that foggy November, with my heart glowing within me, and with the eager determination that not another day should elapse before I should find some deed which was worthy of my lady. But who in all this wide world, could ever have imagined the incredible shape which that deed was to take?
Well, Mr. Malone, from all I hear, you seem to be doing very well.
Thank you, sir.
The colliery explosion was excellent. So was the Southwark fire. You have the true descriptive. Now, what did you want to see me about? Tut, 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 tut. What is it?
Do you think, sir, that you could possibly send me on some mission for the paper? I would do my best to get you some good copy.
What sort of mission had you in mind, Mr. Malone?
Well, sir, anything that had adventure and danger in it. The more difficult, the better it would suit me.
Oh, you seem very anxious to lose your life.
To justify my life, sir.
Dear Mr. Malone, this is very, very exalted. I'm afraid the day for this sort of thing is rather past. The expense of this special mission business hardly justifies the result. And of course, in any case, it would only be an experienced man that I would send on such a mission. You wait a minute. What about exposing a fraud and making him look ridiculous? You could show him up for the liar that he is. Now, how does that appeal to you?
Anything. Anywhere. I don't care.
I wonder whether you could get unfriendly like, or at least on talking terms with this fella. You seem to have a sort of genius for establishing relations with people.
Thank you, sir.
Malone, you can try your luck with Professor Challenger or Enmore Park.
Challenger? The famous zoologist? Wasn't he the man who broke the skull of the reporter for the London Times?
Well, didn't you say it was an adventure you were after?
It is part of the business, sir.
Exactly. I don't suppose he will always be so violent as that. I'm thinking that Blundell got him in at the wrong moment. Maybe, or in the wrong fashion, you may have better luck.
I really know nothing about him. I only remember his name in connection with the court proceedings.
I have a few notes for your guidance, Mr. Malone. I've had my eye on the professor for some time now. Here is a summary of his record with some articles he wrote. Challenger George Edward, born Largs, Northern Britain. Education, Largs Academy, Edinburgh University. British Museum Assistant, Assistant Keeper of Comparative Anthropology Department, 1893. Winner of Crayston Medal for Zoological Research. American Academy of Sciences. Ex-President Paleontological Society, etc., etc. British Association, and so on and so on. Here. I have nothing more for you tonight.
Thank you, sir. Oh, Mr. McArdle, I'm not very clear yet why I'm to interview this gentleman. What has he done?
Well, he went to South America on a solitary expedition 2 years ago. He refused to say exactly where. He came back last year, but somebody started to punch holes in his story. He had some damaged photograph of some dinosaurs that were exposed as fakes. The man gets so touchy that he assaults anyone who asks questions. In my opinion, sir, he's just a homicidal megalomaniac with a turn for science. Now, that's your man, Mr. Malone. Off you run and see what you can make of him. You're big and strong enough to look after yourself.
Half an hour later, I was seated at my desk reading the notes and articles before me. Here's something I might be able to use in my letter. Weismann versus Darwin, with the subheading, Spirited Protest at Vienna. My scientific education having been somewhat neglected, I was unable to follow the whole argument. But it was evident that the professor had handled his subject in a very aggressive fashion, and had thoroughly annoyed his continental colleagues. This is certainly rather deep for a layman. If I could only get a single, good, meaty sentence which seems to convey some sort of definite human idea. Ah, yes. This I will do. This shall be my link with the terrible professor. Dear Professor Challenger, as a humble student of nature, I have always taken the most profound interest in your speculations as to the differences between Darwin and Weismann. I have recently had occasion to refresh my memory by rereading your masterly address at Vienna.
Sir, I have duly received your letter in which you claim to endorse my views, although I'm not aware that they are dependent upon endorsement either from you or anyone else. You have ventured to use the word speculation with regard to my statement upon the subject of Darwinism, and I would call your attention to the fact that such a word in such a connection is offensive to a degree. The context convinces me, however, that you have sinned rather through ignorance and tactlessness than through malice, and so I am content to pass the matter by. You quote an isolated sentence from my lecture, and appear to have some difficulty in understanding it. I should have thought that only a subhuman intelligence could have failed to grasp the point. But if it really needs amplification, I shall consent to see you at the hour named. Though visits and visitors of every sort are exceedingly distasteful to me. You will kindly show the envelope of this letter to my man Austin when you call, as he has to take every precaution to shield me from the intrusive rascals who call themselves journalists. Yours faithfully, George Edward Challenger.
pulled up in front of an imposing house with heavily curtained windows that gave every indication of wealth upon the part of this formidable professor. The door was opened by an odd, swarthy, dried-up person of uncertain age, with a dark pilot jacket on. He looked at me up and down with a searching light blue eye.
Expected.
An appointment.
Got your letter? Right. Very well. This way, sir.
One moment. Could you wait a minute, Austin?
Yes, madam.
Step in here, sir. May I ask you if you've ever met my husband before?
No, madam, I have not had the honor.
Then I apologize to you in advance. I must tell you that he is a perfectly impossible person. Absolutely impossible. If you're forewarned, you will be the more ready to make allowances.
It is most considerate of you, madam.
Get quickly out of the room if he seems inclined to be violent. Don't wait to argue with him. Several people have been injured doing so. Afterwards, there's always a public scandal, and it reflects upon George and me. You don't want to talk about South America, do you?
Yes, I did.
Me. That is his most dangerous subject. You won't believe a word he says, I'm sure. But don't tell him so, for it makes him very violent. Pretend to believe him, and you may get through this one in one piece. Remember, he believes it himself. A more honest man never lived. You had better go, or he may suspect something. If he becomes dangerous, ring the bell and hold him off until I come. Even at his worst, I can usually control him. Austin, escort Mr. Malone. George is waiting for him.
This way, sir.
I could see the professor sitting in a rotating chair behind a broad table, which was covered with books, maps, and diagrams. As I entered, his seat spun round to face me. His appearance made me gasp. I was prepared for something strange, but not for so overpowering a personality as this. It was his size which took one's breath away. His size and his enormous presence. His head was huge, the largest I've ever seen upon a human being. He had a face and beard which I associate with an Assyrian bull with a massive forehead.
Sir, Mr. Malone.
Well, what now?
You were good enough to give me an appointment, sir. Here's your letter.
You are the young man who cannot understand plain English, are you? My general conclusions are good enough to approve, as I understand.
Entirely, sir. Entirely.
Dear me, that strengthens my position very much, does it not? Your age and appearance make your support doubly valuable. Well, at least you're better than that head of swine in Vienna.
They seem to have behaved abominably.
I assure you that I can fight my own battles, and I have no possible need of your sympathy. With his back to the wall, George Edward Challenger is happiest. Well, sir, let us do what we can to curtail this visit, which can hardly be agreeable to you, and is inexpressibly irksome to me. You had, as I have been led to believe, some comments to make upon the proposition which I advanced in my thesis. Come, come.
I am, of course, a mere student, hardly more. I might say then I'm an earnest inquirer. At the same time, it seemed to me that you were a little severe upon Weissman in this matter. Has not the general evidence since that date tended to, to strengthen his position?
What evidence?
Well, of course I'm aware that there is not any, what you might call, definite evidence. I alluded merely to the trend of modern thought and the general scientific point of view, if I might so express it.
I suppose you are aware that the cranial index is a constant factor.
Naturally.
And that the telegony is still sub judice.
Undoubtedly.